Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagna Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. There's a pranam mantra that is often recited to Giriraj. It goes as follows. Namaste Girirajaya Shri Govardhana Namine Ashesha Klesha Nashaya Paramanandadaine. Namaste. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Giriraj, the king of all mountains, Giriraj, whose name is Govardhan, Shri Govardhana Namine. And this king of mountains, whose name is Govardhan, has a very special quality in that one who takes shelter of him, Ashesha Klesha, all kleshas, all reactions, all miseries are Nashaya, are reduced to zero. For those who study Nectar of Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami describes um, six qualities of pure bhakti, of pure devotional service. And one of them is Klesh Agni, Klesha Agni, that all kleshas are burned to ashes by the execution of pure devotional service. Similarly, by taking shelter of Giriraj, Govardhan, Ashesha Klesha, all kleshas are eradicated to zero. When these kleshas are eradicated to zero, all that is troubling to the heart, in the words of Srimad Bhagavatam, all that is troubling to the heart are reduced. Then Paramananda Daine, we are able to experience the supreme bliss. And what is that supreme bliss? Krishna Prema. This is the facility that Sri Giriraj Govardhan affords to those who take shelter of him. There's a very beautiful prayer which I mentioned yesterday that was composed by Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Govardhana Avasa Pratana Dashakam. 10 prayers where Raghunath Das Goswami prays for the mercy of Govardhan that he will be granted residence at Govardhan. There's a very beautiful thing that one witnesses when one performs Govardhan Parikram. When one goes around the hill, you'll find often that there are persons who take little rocks, like, rocks at Govardhan have different shapes, and they take some flat rocks and they put it on Govardhan itself and they make it into the shape of a house. In this way, persons who perform Govardhan Parikrama are also praying, like Raghunath Das Goswami is praying, that my dear Govardhan, please grant me residence at your lotus feet. The first verse of this prayer goes as follows. Nijapati Buddha Danda Chatra Bhavam Prapadya Pratihatam Madadrishto Danda Devendra Garva Atula Pritula Shaila Srini Bhupa Priyam Me Nija Nikata Nivasam Dehi Govardhanatvam. So Raghunath Das Goswami he prays, O Govardhan, King of all incomparably great mountains, O hill that became an umbrella on the arm of your own Lord as a handle, and then destroyed the pride of the Deva king Indra, madly attacking with raised weapons. Please grant me the residence near you that is so dear to me. So Devendra Garva, this Indra was attacking, but you tolerated all that. Why? Because Krishna's hand was touching you, was touching you. So this prayer is offered by Raghunath Das Goswami. Yesterday we discussed the important place of Govardhan in comparison to the spiritual reality. That beyond this material world, beyond even Brahman, there exists the kingdom of God known as Vaikunta. And beyond Vaikunta, there is the district known as Mathurapuri of Vrindavan. And within Mathurapuri, there's Vrindavan, which is special because Krishna performed his Ras dance. Mathura is special because Krishna appears there. But Vrindavan is special because Krishna performed his Ras Lila there. Even more condensed is the area known as Govardhan because Krishna performed so many pastimes there. And even more condensed is that sacred place known as Radha Kund because it is overflowing with Radha Krishna's own prema. And we mentioned yesterday that you cannot separate Radha Kund from Govardhan. They are part of the same area. Yesterday, we also gave some reasons for Krishna's enacting the Govardhan Lila. Does anybody want to share what they remember in terms of the reasons that we gave for Krishna's performance of the Govardhan Lila? We gave about 5 reasons. What were there? One person at a time can just unmute and say what they remember in terms of the reasons for Krishna's performing the Govardhan Lila.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I've learned in last class, about our shastras, indicate that the mountains, back then they used to have wings and they would fly from place to place and plant themselves there. And then Indra, because of the disturbance the mountains were causing, he would cut off their wings, like with his lightning bolts. So
Hmm.
to chastise Indra, for his deed, the Lord would have supported Govardhan Hill, in this Leela. Hare
Yes.
Krishna.
Yes, very good. That's one reason. Any other reasons why Krishna would have performed this Govardhan Lila? Should I call people or put people on the spot, or do you want to, or maybe you should
Hare
volunteer?
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Because the gopis and them would lament that, Krishna is out whole day and they don't get time, and so he lifted Govardhan Hills so that he can spend all those days with them, the 7 days and nights with them.
Yes, very good point. Each one of Krishna's devotees would only get a certain amount of time with him during the day, and they were very upset by that. And so Krishna enacted the pastime of Govardhan that for 7 days and 7 nights continuously, without sleep, and they would have the opportunity to spend time with Krishna under the shade of Giriraj. So those are two reasons. Another reason why Krishna performed Govardhan Lila.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Yes,
So, Indra had become full of pride, and Krishna wanted to teach him a lesson by crushing his pride.
yes. Indra had become full of pride, and Krishna wanted to smash that pride. A mountain of pride Indra had developed was smashed by the great mountain known as Govardhan. What else? Those are three reasons. We discussed two more.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, a bit louder, right? Yeah, a bit low.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
Lord Krishna wanted to know why his eternal devotees, his eternal associates, were worshipping the demigod Indra.
Hmm. Yeah, he didn't too like that, right? He
Right.
wasn't too happy about that. So he's looking at his associates worshipping Indra and he's wondering, what is the need for that? They have me. That should be enough. They shouldn't want anything more, you know? And therefore, he enacted this pastime of Govardhan. There was one more reason, a bit esoteric in terms of Krishna's meeting with different gopis. Who remembers that one? Okay, so I'll remind you. Krishna, one time on Govardhan, wanted to meet with Chandravali, and Govardhan arrested his movement and said, no, no, you can't go. I will tell Radha what you are doing. And they had a negotiation, and Giriraj finally relented. Okay, you go, but you will still get caught because your footprints remain. So through the pasam of Govardhan, all of Krishna's footprints get washed from the hill, so Krishna can have his way. So yesterday we discussed chapter 24 rather, um, the worshipping of Govardhan and the performance of Govardhan Puja and the performance of Govardhan Parikrama, and everybody was happy. Kavi Karnapur said that the Brahmanas should be fed until they laugh in ecstasy. And then they started to go around the hill and they were singing songs, and the gopis were singing amongst themselves, composing songs about Krishna's pastimes. But the problem is, everybody was happy except for one person. Who was that one person? Indra, who had developed a mountain of pride. So Indra, he sees the residents of Vrindavan joyfully engaging in this festival of Govardhan Puja, and he becomes angry. He had realized that his sacrifice had been put aside. Not only was his sacrifice put aside, the very same articles that were supposed to be used for his worship were used for worship of this hill. And as a result of that, he became furious. He became seething with anger. He became seething with anger. And this anger was directed towards Nanda Maharaj and the others who were accepting Krishna as their Lord. Indra saw that his items for worship were used up and they performed puja, but they didn't perform puja for him. And he realized that because he did not receive his due portion. Every time puja is performed, different people receive certain portions of the yajna. And in this case, Indra, because he was supposed to be worshipped as the prime beneficiary of that yajna, of that puja, he found that he didn't receive his share. And this angered him. And who did he become angry with? He became angry specifically with Nanda Maharaj. Why? Because Nanda Maharaj was the leader of the residents of Vrindavan, and he had listened to the advice of his son Krishna. Indra also became angry with Upananda, Nanda Maharaj's brother, and the other cowherds that immediately took Krishna's side. He became angry with the priests, who he felt should know better. They're just listening to this boy. These priests are supposed to be mature and versed in knowledge and give leadership and guidance to society. Yet, they are listening to this boy. His anger was due to pride, and it was misplaced because the Brajabasis had taken shelter of Krishna, who was not only the most affectionate one to the Brajabasis, actually, Krishna was the Lord of Indra. And there's repeated histories in the Bhagavatam that occurred before this. For example, in the eighth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when the Devata's position became usurped, they turned to the Lord, and the Lord appeared as Vamana, as Upa Indra, as the younger brother of Indra, for the purpose of reclaiming the property of the Devatas, for the purpose of reclaiming Indra's property. And repeatedly, the Lord appears to help Indra. Repeatedly, Indra develops qualities that are unbecoming of someone who holds high office. And Krishna repeatedly has to correct him. So it's quite interesting. What was the position of Indra? Indra, he is accustomed receiving this puja, he's accustomed receiving this worship. And this one time, this worship was passed over, and they worship Govardhan Hill. That's a very simple thing. They just didn't do. Can you imagine in today's society? We're supposed to pay bills, right? Like for the different amenities we use. We're supposed to pay electricity bill. We're supposed to pay, light bill, water bill, cable bill. Most importantly, we have to pay our internet bill, right? And if we don't pay these bills, they may tolerate for a little bit, and then they cut us off. They may send us a warning. Your bill is due. If you don't pay by this date, you'll get cut off, or you incur a charge, a fee. And if you don't pay further than that, you may get another notice due for disconnection. Due for disconnection. So Indra, in this case, he didn't receive his bill. He didn't receive his portion of the yagya. He didn't send a notice. He immediately blew his lid. He became very angry. And what did he conspire to do? He decided to punish the residents of Vrindavan for taking the advice of Krishna. I will not just pour rain on them, I will employ the clouds that are employed in flooding creation. There's a type of cloud known as Samvartaka, and those clouds are specifically engaged at the time of universal dissolution. There's different periods of destruction that take place in the course of the creation. And in one of those dissolutions, rain falls and floods the creation. And the Samvartaka clouds are especially meant for this. So just imagine, Indra just didn't receive his puja, and he decided he would kill everyone. He would kill everyone. Why? Because he was thinking, I am the supreme controller. He lost sight of his true identity, his true position. Why? Because of excessive pride, Indra considered himself to be the controller, Isha Mani. And he sent the clouds that pour rain at the time of universal destruction. And accompanying them, he also sent the seven varieties of winds that assist them in this universal destruction. It's very interesting. Indra's position is not an ordinary one. Indra is the leader of the Devatas. He's the king of heaven. Deva Indra. He's the king of heaven. And yet, this person who is in a leadership role is acting in this despicable way, in a way that is unbecoming of a leader. As leaders, we have a responsibility to act properly. Clearly, Indra is not acting in that right capacity, and he needs to be corrected. And there's many ways that sometimes we correct persons in authority. Sometimes the immediate reaction or the immediate response to somebody who is not acting properly in a leadership position is to kick them out, orchestrate their removal. And in this case, perhaps removal might have been warranted. But rather than removal, Krishna wants him to be reformed. He doesn't just want to kick Indra out, he wants Indra to be reformed. And there's some lessons we can learn from this. How do we respond, not just as leaders, but as individuals, when we feel that our rights, that our privileges are being trampled upon? When we find ourselves in provoking situations, how do we respond to those situations? There's a saying, a statement made, very nice statement. I can't remember who made it. I can't remember if it was Abraham Lincoln or it was some leader. He says, any man can stand adversity. Any man can stand adversity. But if you want to see the true person's true character, give them power. Quite interesting. Any person can stand adversity, but if we want to see a person's character, we have to give them power. And we see that persons sometimes they get just a small, position, excuse me, not even the biggest position, and they become very elevated in their consciousness, not in the good way, but they think themselves to be very, very great. And by so doing, they alienate persons around them. Power is something that and Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, especially when someone is accustomed being honored. To such a person, dishonor is a fate worse than death. They rather die than to experience dishonor. You see this sometimes depicted in, Japanese samurai movies. If they die it by the hands of this enemy, it is to be dishonored by them. And they feel that better I take my own life than to die in a despicable way. And they thrust their swords into their hearts. For them, that is more honorable. So Krishna says, death, dishonor is a fate worse than death. So these samurai, they would rather experience death than to be dishonored. They have that kshatriya spirit. So Indra, when we look in comparison to what he experienced in terms of what he perceived as being disrespect put in his direction, and the retaliation he was about to make is no comparison. Can you imagine if somebody disrespects us at the temple, at our jobs, on the street, and our immediate response is to kill them and their entire family and their friends? destroy all their property. It's not proportionate. And therefore, how we respond to provoking situations is actually the true test of our character. Oftentimes, I heard this from Chaitanya Charan, and it's quite true, that when we experience provocation, oftentimes we are introduced to ourselves. On the other side of that, in provoking situations, others are also introduced to us. They get to see what is on the inside. There's a very interesting pastime late in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sages had gathered and they wanted to find out who is the greatest amongst all the devatas. If we have to perform a puja, then we have to know who is the greatest of all the devatas. And so they employed Bhrigu Muni, that he should be employed to find who is the greatest of the devatas. So they all agreed that within the universe, the three greatest devatas are Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. All others are lesser than them. So they employed the services of Bhrigu Muni to test, to see which of these devatas is the greatest of all. So Bhrigu Muni went to Brahma, and Bhrigu Muni is Brahma's son. So he entered into the court of Brahma, and he didn't offer any respect to Brahma. He remained silent and just stood. Didn't show Brahma any courtesy. Brahma became very angry. And Bhrigu could understand that he became angry. Then he went to the abode of Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva is also one of Brahma's sons. And when he saw Bhrigu, Shiva came forward to embrace his brother, Bhrigu. And Bhrigu said, "Don't touch me. You're covered in the ashes of a crematorium. You keep the company of all these undead creatures and lower creatures. How can you touch me?" And Shiva became angry. And he moved to strike Bhrigu, but he held himself back. Then Bhrigu Muni went to Vaikunta, and he saw Lakshmi Devi lying next to Vishnu, and Vishnu was lying, relaxing on Anantashesh. And Bhrigu Muni, without announcing himself, without doing anything, he just walked up to Vishnu and kicked him on his chest. Can you imagine? Walked up to Vishnu and kicked him on his chest. And Vishnu immediately, with great concern, with great apprehension, with great deference towards Bhrigu, he supplicated himself before Bhrigu and said, "My dear Bhrigu Muni, you are a great Brahmana, and the lotus feet of the Brahmanas are so soft, and my chest is so hard that certainly your feet must have suffered great pain by striking my chest. Further than that, I did not offer you proper respect when you entered into my presence. Therefore, will you please forgive me?" And he requested. And then Bhrigu realized that actually the greatest of all the devatas is Vishnu. Of course, the pastime continues later on, and Shukadev narrates a pastime to show even greater than Vishnu is Krishna. Even greater than Vishnu is Krishna. And this comes almost at the end of the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada, in writing about this incident in Krishna book, he speaks about the various kinds of offenses that we can commit. The first type of offense is a mental offense. Bhrigu, when he entered into the presence of Brahma, he just didn't acknowledge Brahma, and Brahma took offense to that. So Brahma, he fell victim even to a mental offense. When he went to Lord Shiva, he knew that Lord Shiva would not accept a mental offense. So he took it one step further and he gave a verbal offense. He threw insulting words towards Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva, he took offense at that point. But the most severe of all offenses, in the words of Srila Prabhupada, is a corporeal offense, a bodily offense. And Bhrigu he didn't just commit a bodily offense toward Lord Vishnu, he struck the Lord on his chest. Very heinous offense. But he was amazed to see the reaction that Vishnu genuinely displayed. And Srila Prabhupada writes in this regard, one's greatness has to be estimated by one's ability to remain tolerant in provoking situations. One's greatness has to be estimated by one's ability to be tolerant in provoking situations. Oftentimes, when we are provoked, and I'll tell you one thing, in most cases, persons, we have that capability that we are able to hold back. There's often this battle that goes on within us, and oftentimes good sense generally prevails. We don't respond in the heat of the moment. We don't respond, just lash out at other people. Unless it's something like really, it strikes us at the core. And that's a sign of civil society. We don't often say or express what we are feeling at that moment. Can you imagine if everybody just expressed what they were feeling at any point in time? The world would not be a nice place. It wouldn't be a nice place. So when we experience provoking situations, oftentimes our darker side comes out. Our darker side is revealed. And sometimes persons may mark us by that. And they may say, I always knew you were like that. You just put on a front in front of people. But now you reveal what you are actually like. And sometimes when if persons make that kind of statement in response to a person displaying a negative response, it's unfair. Because given time, that person may realize, I should not have acted in this way. Or even if they act in this way and they regret and they try to make amends, that's a sign of thoughtfulness. That's a sign of growth. How we respond in provoking situations can also change over time. It is not that because we respond in a particular way at this juncture, 5 years down the road, we experience the same situation and respond in the same way. If that happens, then it means we are not introspective and we are not making an effort to grow, out of these shackles that bind us. Indra, he received this provocation, and Srimad Bhagavatam and the Acharyas are very clear. Krishna purposely spoke in a way to provoke Indra. Mind you, this is Krishna. Sometimes we may see somebody who may not be acting in the right way, but it is not our job to provoke anybody. That's the other side of it. Krishna can do that because Krishna ultimately is in charge. But it is not our job to go about provoking people to reveal something that we think everybody should know about them. But Indra, he at this juncture failed miserably. Why did he fail miserably? Because he was full of pride. And pride clouded his higher faculty of intelligence. And it erupted in anger. When pride is smashed, anger erupts from that. And therefore, Indra's behavior was unbecoming for someone who was in a leadership position. It was unbecoming for someone who has the responsibility of care over others. And we could learn from that. We as individuals at some point in time would all have responsibility of care over others. It may be at our jobs, it may be at home, in our families, and how we respond when situations comes up in our relationships, at our workplace, at the temple, is very, very important. So Indra, he went from 0 to 60 in zero point 0.1 seconds. And he started to talk. When people become angry, they often give very eloquent speeches that they come to regret. And this was one such case. Indra, he being intoxicated, by pride, he started to project that onto the Brajabasis. And he said things like, these cowherd men have become so intoxicated by their prosperity that they have surrendered to an ordinary human being. He refers to Krishna as Martya, an ordinary mortal boy. And thus they have offended the Devatas. So they're not, notice what Indra is saying, right? He's not saying they offended me. They offended the Devatas collectively by not worshipping me. But in his heart, Indra is feeling that these rascals taking shelter of this boy and his foolish talk, they have offended me, and therefore I have to uh, punish them. He uses an interesting word in this regard, upasritya. This upasritya literally means taking shelter of, if we look at the word for word meaning, but it has a negative connotation, similar to the word upapati. Upapati means paramour, to have an outside relationship, an extramarital affair. Upapati. By using that word upashritya, Indra is indicating that he thinks that the Brajabasis, they have strayed from the path of dharma. They have given up their reputation, they have given up their family heritage and their family rules, and they have foolishly taken shelter of this human, this little boy, and they have disrespected the devatas. And by disrespecting the devatas, he's thinking that they actually disrespected me. That these people of Braja, they have become foolish. One of the things that you'll find in Srimad Bhagavatam is oftentimes when persons are insulting Krishna, these words can be taken in two ways: the literal meaning, where the insult is coming forward, or the hidden meaning, where something positive is being said. So, in this verse, Indra is criticizing the Brajabasis for taking shelter of Krishna, that they have lost their intelligence, they have given up dharma. But the hidden meaning of this is that he's thinking that the people of Braja, they are actually dwellers of the forest. And because they are dwellers of the forest, the quality of sattva is very high in them. And they have surrendered to Krishna, who is Para Brahman, but who is accepting now a human form and walking among us, Martyam. And Krishna is most affectionate to his devotees, and therefore it was proper for him to ignore the devatas. So these are two ways we can understand Indra's speech. Oftentimes, when we become provoked, there is no double meaning to our speech. If we chastise somebody, it's because we are angry. It is not because, actually you are very nice. I am just calling you a fool, but you are not really a fool. No, it's not like that. It is described that Saraswati was influencing Indra's words, and therefore these words have this underlying meaning that is positive in the light of Krishna and his devotees. Indra continues that he says that their taking shelter of Krishna is just like the foolish attempt of men who abandon transcendental knowledge and instead try to cross over the ocean of material existence on the false boats of fruitive and ritual sacrifices. is interesting that they're giving up that, but in worshipping Indra, that in itself is performing fruitive and ritual sacrifice. So therefore, that is not beneficial. He continues that they have acted inimically towards me by taking shelter of this ordinary boy who thinks himself wise, but is actually thinks Krishna to be foolish and quite talkative. He says that Krishna is talkative and foolish because he speaks so many arguments, but he himself doesn't believe. This atheistic karma mimamsa and atheistic sankhya. Krishna himself doesn't accept that. And yet he is using these arguments to speak to his father. And just see the audacity of this boy. He's speaking so forcefully to his father. He has no respect. This to speak so boldly in front of his father. Indra is thinking that Krishna is completely ignorant. Because all he can do, all he does is herd cows. What is that? Low class job. And he thinks himself to be a very learned person. But it's interesting, there's another meaning to this. That Krishna is actually being praised. By Krishna's mercy, even a fool becomes expert in speaking. And if you look at the Sanskrit, Balisha and Vachalam. Balisha means foolish person, and Vachalam means one who is able to speak. So one who's foolish is able to speak very eloquently, according to Vedic authority. And Krishna is Tadbham because he doesn't have to bow to anyone. Because there's no one who is qualified so much that Krishna can bow to and offer his homage. And he's Agyam because there's nothing more for Krishna to know because he's omniscient. And Krishna is Panditamaninam. He's not thinking himself to be a learned person. He's actually the best of all persons, and he, Krishna, is worshipped and honored by those who are actually learned, by those who are actually knowers of the absolute truth. So, in this way, Indra becomes angry, and externally he's chastising Krishna and the Brajabasis, but there's a hidden meaning that is inspired by Goddess Saraswati. Indra, in his anger, he calls forth the Samvartaka clouds and he addresses them that the prosperity has made the Brajabasis mad with pride and their arrogance is even supported by Krishna. Go now and remove that pride and bring the animals to destruction. Don't worry, you will not be alone. I will follow on my carrier Airavata, and with the swift and powerful wind gods, we will decimate the village of Nanda Maharaj. Sanatan Goswami gives a very interesting comment in this regard. He says that Indra specifically points out Vrindavan, the village of Nanda, and doesn't mention Mathura or the kingdom of Kamsa. Why? Because Indra, despite you know showing himself to be such a great person, is fearful of Kamsa. I don't know if you all saw how many of you would have seen the Mahavatar Narsingha movie. And one of the best parts of that movie for me when we went to see it, I'm here in Trinidad with a number of devotees, was that at the end of it, Indra, he gets back his kingdom. Srila Prabhupada writes in one purport in Srimad Bhagavatam, I think in 1.3.28, that Indra was fearful by the unfavorable raising of Hiranyakashipu's eyebrow. So Hiranyakashipu would just do this and look in Indra's direction, and Indra would be trembling with fear. So after Hiranyakashipu was killed and Hiranyaksha, Indra was having a time, and the movie depicts he was drinking and he was. And then Narad Muni comes, Narayan, Narayan, and he says something to Indra. He says, Indra, Do you know that these were only the first two births of Jaya and Vijaya? The first births of Jaya and Vijaya, and they still have two more left? And then you just see Indra's jaw drops. He becomes stunned. Again, he becomes fearful. So Indra, he was showing himself to be so powerful, in possession of so much prowess. He would extract his revenge for being disrespected by the Brajabasis. But he's very careful to leave out Mathura. Why? Because he's fearful of Kamsa. This is a very interesting point Sanatan Goswami makes. And so, being ordered by Indra, the Samvartaka crowds go and they begin to wreak havoc in Braja. They released torrents of rain upon the inhabitants of Braja. The wind blew fiercely, the clouds blazed with eruptions of lightning, and they roared with the crack of thunder as they poured down rain and hailstones. Srimad Bhagavatam describes that the rain was as thick as columns of water, not just hard droplets, but like columns of water falling down like thunder on the earth. And floods began to consume the lower ground, so much so that one could not distinguish what was low ground and what was high ground. The residents of Vrindavan became very disturbed. The cows, the cowherd men, and the ladies, pained by the cold, all approached Govinda for shelter. They were shivering from the distress caused by the severe rainfall, and they tried to cover themselves and their animals, the cows and the calves, as they approached Krishna. And they cried out to Krishna, Krishna Krishna Mahabhaga Tvannatam Gokulam Prabho Tratum Arhasi Devana Kupitad Bhakta Vatsala. Krishna Krishna, O most fortunate one, please deliver the cows and us from the wrath of the Devatas. O Lord, you are most affectionate to your devotees. The Brajabasis, in calling out to Krishna, they remembered Garga Muni's prediction that by Krishna's grace they would be able to cross over all difficulties. And one of the things that Garga Muni said to Nanda Maharaj is, your son is just as good as Narayan. He's Narayana Sama. He's just as good as Narayana. And they thought that because of this prediction that was given by Garga Muni, that Narayana himself would empower Krishna to protect them. There was so much overflowing with love for Krishna. They didn't think it was Krishna who was doing the protection, that Narayana would empower Krishna, and thus Krishna would be able to protect them. Krishna immediately understood that this wickedness was the work of Indra and thought that this was his reaction. Why? Because they stopped his worship. It was exactly the reaction that Krishna was hoping for. It was exactly the reaction that Krishna was hoping for. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he comments that this severe distress inflicted upon the residents of Vraja by Indra was an arrangement made by Krishna's pastime potency or Lila Shakti, so that Krishna could taste the sweetness of his devotees' prema to his full satisfaction. And in return, they would also be able to taste the sweetness of Krishna's prema to their full satisfaction. The example given is just like for a hungry person, the pain of hunger increases the happiness that one feels when we finally get excellent food. Just like when we are fasting for Janmashtami or Nrsimha Chaturdashi or Ram Navami or some fast day, we begin to feel hungry. And when we get that feast, we become fully satisfied. So, similarly, all of Krishna's different devotees would fast from Krishna's association in so many different ways. And now that fast was coming to fruition, that they would get to their full satisfaction, the nectarian beauty of Krishna's loving exchange for an unbroken period of time. And Krishna would also taste the sweetness of his devotees' love for him. for 7 days continuously. Krishna immediately understood that this wickedness was the work of Indra and thought that this was his reaction. And therefore he resolved that I am going to counteract this disturbance by Indra by using my own mystic potency. He thought that devatas like Indra often become puffed up by their position of power and think themselves to be the lord of the universe. And Krishna resolved to destroy that ignorance. One thing we should point out is that Krishna thought that the devatas should know better because generally they are empowered by the mode of goodness because they are devata. And Krishna thought that when I break their false prestige, my purpose is not to destroy them, my purpose is to bring them relief. So, this is an interesting point that Krishna is making here, that we can imbibe in our own relationships. Don't deal with the person, deal with the situation. I remember many years ago, going into certain meetings, the mood of the meeting was that we are going to deal with this person today. We are going to deal with that person. And this never sat right with me, and I couldn't understand why. You know, I couldn't understand why. But more constructive is not just to attack the person, but it's not the person that we're upset with, it's the behavior. And if the behavior changes, then we can progress. Just like in relationships, when we have issues with our partners, with our friends, with our bosses, don't attack the boss, deal with the issue. Articulate what is the issue and what difficulty we are having with that issue and address that. You know, don't talk about the person, but address the problem. And when we have that type of mentality, then problems which seem very big shrink in size because the route to solving those problems become more collaborative as opposed to being combative. It's a skill we all have to learn how to effectively deal with problems, and Krishna is demonstrating that here. He's he is not disavowing or rejecting Indra. He's disapproving of Indra's conduct, and rather than reject him, he's going to reform him. This is Krishna, and in doing that, he will then simultaneously enjoy a great festival. So, Krishna, when he sees what is going on, he wants to reform Indra because he thinks that Indra is still my devotee. And therefore, Krishna, to counteract the mountain of pride that had developed in the heart of Indra, picks up the mountain known as Govardhan as easily as a child picks up a mushroom. On some acharyas, they say as easily as an elephant picks up a lotus flower in its trunk, or as easily as an elephant picks up a clump of grass. It's very easy. There's no effort whatsoever. So Krishna picks up this um, Govardhan hill and he invites the Brajabasis to enter under the hill. Krishna called the cowherds to take shelter under the hill and he said, don't be afraid. Don't think that because I'm lifting this hill, there will be some inconvenience to any of you. Without fear, please enter underneath this hill and take shelter. It's described that when Krishna lifted the hill, there were animals on top of the hill, and the hill extended so much that they extended above the peaks of the clouds, and those animals felt no inconvenience. Kavi Karnapur describes that even the animals who were on the hill under the level of the clouds, like lions, saw the clouds as elephants and started to attack the clouds. They felt, great rigor and vigor being in connection with Govardhan, which was touched by the hand of Krishna. Mother Yashoda was thinking that this hill is just 3 miles. This hill is just 3 miles across. How can the entirety of Vraja, with all its animals and dependents and paraphernalia take shelter under this hill. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur described that being touched by Krishna in great ecstasy, two things happened. From 3 miles, the hill extended to 32 miles and would expand as much as was needed to accommodate the residents of Vrindavan. And additionally, being touched by Krishna's hand, even though Indra was striking Govardhan with immensely powerful lightning bolts, Govardhan was feeling as if these are offerings of Pushpanjali or flower petals on his back. So he felt no inconvenience whatsoever. Other descriptions given say that when Krishna lifted up the hill, then earth fell around the hill that prevented water from entering into the cavern or the valley that was created under the hill. Another description given of how Govardhan can accommodate everybody. In Harivamsa, Krishna describes that this Govardhan can easily give shelter to all the three worlds. So, what then to speak of this land of Vraja? It is also said that when Govardhan was touched by Krishna's hand, he expanded such that his peak stretched far above the clouds, and therefore those animals, as I mentioned before, didn't even feel the slightest of inconvenience. Krishna assured the Brajabasis that they should not fear that the hill would fall from his hand, and that the deliverance had already been arranged. And therefore, being assured by Krishna's words, they entered under the hill, where they formed ample room for the entire community along with the animals and other paraphernalia. It is described that the cows they took up positions on the outskirts, and grasses sprouted, and they were nourished for those 7 days. And different members of the residents of Vrindavan they took up different positions under the hill. And all of them had the experience that they were gazing at Krishna and Krishna was standing in front of them. As is described in Srimad Bhagavatam, that Krishna set aside his hunger and his thirst and all conditions of personal pleasure and stood and held that hill on the little finger of his left hand while the people of Braja simply gazed lovingly at him. It is described that not only did Krishna set aside his hunger and thirst and all bodily needs, but also the residents of Vrindavan, because they were so immersed in the ecstatic bliss of seeing Krishna continuously. The clouds poured for 7 continuous days, and they could not flood Vrindavan due to Krishna's Icha Shakti. That by Krishna's desire, as soon as the water would hit the earth, it dried up. Immediately it was dispelled. There's another description that is given that Krishna's Sudarshan Chakra circumambulated the hill and evaporated all the water. There's another description given that one sage, I can't remember if it's Agastya or Paulastya, they drank all the water that was coming off of the peaks of Giriraj. But this experience that the residents of Vrindavan were having as they were standing below the hill gazing at Krishna, the passage of 7 days felt to be like the passing of a single unit of time known as a ghatika. A ghatika is a unit of time that measures 24 minutes. So 7 days for them pass as if it were 24 minutes. When Indra observed this exhibition of Krishna's mystic power, he became astonished and his pride shattered. He ordered the clouds to desist and he became fearful that now Krishna is going to punish me. Oftentimes when we have our outbursts, and we realize that there's someone bigger than us who is coming, we sometimes cower down as well. We sometimes cower down. Krishna When he saw that the clouds and the rain and the wind had now ceased, and the sky had become clear, and the sun had again arisen in the sky, Krishna addressed the residents of Vraja and told them that they can now secure their animals and families and they can come out from under the hill. The residents of Vraja came as they were coming out. They greeted Krishna according to their respective relationships. Some kissed his head, some massaged him, and others offered blessings and sweet words. Others joked with him, while others fell at his feet and massaged them. The gopis embraced Krishna within their minds because they were publicly situated, because they were of the nature of their relationship and the other elders who were there. A public display of affection was not proper at that point in time. So they worshipped him with anuraga. Anuraga is a technical term which means a very intense form of prema. Yashoda, Rohini, Nanda, and Balaram, they also embraced Krishna and they were overwhelmed with affection and they offered blessings to him. Uh, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur presents an interesting point. He says, how come it is that Balaram, who is Anantasesh, his expansion is Anantasesh, why didn't Balaram hold up the hill just as he holds up the universes? And it is described that because Krishna decided that he was going to perform this pastime, there was nothing that Balaram could do to intervene. So he simply had to observe Krishna's pastimes. Another description is given that by Sanatan Goswami that very ancient paintings depict Yashoda and Rohini feeding Krishna butter and the other gopas using their sticks to hold up the hill to render assistance to Krishna. So Sanatan Goswami describes that all of this was done out of pure affection. And there's descriptions given actually in Gopal Champu and Nanda Vrindavan Champu by Jiva Goswami and Kavi Karnapur, respectively. A very funny description that Batu or Madhu Mangal is saying to Mother Yashoda that you look like you're under so much distress seeing Krishna holding up this hill. You should not worry, Mother Yashoda. Yashoda Mai. That is my potency of my mantras is actually keeping Giriraj floating above. That there's no harm coming to Krishna. And Mother Yashoda becomes angry at Batu. You know, how you impudent boy. Why are you saying these things? Don't you see he's just a young boy? And not only not on his right hand, but on his left hand, he's holding up this hill. If anyone holds even a small weight over their head for a period of time, they become emaciated. And my son, he's holding this huge mountain. I'm very concerned for his well being. So don't try to console me with these false words. And then there are also descriptions that while all of this is taking place, the gopis are exchanging glances with Krishna and nobody is seeing. But they are embracing Krishna within their hearts and they are casting secret glances towards Krishna, and Krishna is becoming enlivened. And Krishna is even holding up this hill to 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 gain favor with the gopis. They will think, oh, he's so strong. He has so much power in those strong arms. We cannot wait to be embraced by him. So this is the festival of Govardhan as Indra, you know, something which could have been disastrous becomes very glorious. After the rain stops and the water subsides and the Brajabasis go back to their homes, the residents of the heavenly planets they pour down flowers and the Gandharvas resoundingly played their conch shells and their kettle drums and they sang songs. And Krishna left with his friends and he went to the place where he was herding his cows just before this incident took place. And just as the gopis were leaving, they began to sing songs about Krishna's lifting of Govardhan Hill and other pastimes that Krishna performed. And these pastimes deeply touched their hearts, and they were overwhelmed with ecstasy as they were singing. You know, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes that while Krishna was lifting Govardhan hill, Radha and other beloved gopis were secretly associating with him and by casting glances at him. And out of love, they were immediately able to compose songs about Krishna's pastimes. So, in yesterday's class, we discussed the Govardhan Puja itself, and today we discuss Indra's reaction. In the next class, we'll discuss what happened to Indra after the Govardhan Puja was finished. So I'll stop here for today. And if there are any questions, any comments, anything anybody would like to add, we can discuss for a few minutes. We have some extra time today.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thanks so much for the wonderful, illuminating presentation. I was just thinking when you mentioned, some elements like, Govardhan Hill expanding and so, sometimes if people generally we try to evaluate and make assessment of things just based on our limited perception or our limited experience of things. But I think it is important when we're hearing Krishna's pastimes to know that it is God we are dealing with, and rather than how non-devotees would immediately conclude, this is mythology, this don't make sense, this not practical or so. Rather, for devotees, there has to be that element of faith that we're dealing with God here. And we shouldn't just try to make some evaluation that how the whole of Raja, how everybody is going to, fit under this. And, there are so many things that we may try to figure out, did they be, was people cooking, did they have, cooking and, for 7 days and, so, so it's like really, hearing Krishna pastimes, that is why the beginning of Bhagavatam, those who are near Matsar. This Bhagavatam is really, this Lila is for those who are near Matsar, free from envy. They wouldn't go trying to dissect everything and analyze and, like that. Devotees have faith. And so I was just thinking, along those lines that, sometimes when we hear some of these elements, then they give us a little insight that, yes, Krishna is full of, potencies and this can be done as God we are dealing with rather than doubt and how could this have taken place? Yeah,
Hmm.
that's just some thoughts came to my mind, Hare Krishna.
The thing is, like when dealing with God, if it is something difficult to understand, it might be that because it's God, and if it's something beyond our ability to comprehend, there's a greater chance it's more fantastic. Because if something is easy to understand, then it can't be so difficult. It can't be so great. You know what I mean? Like something like that. And the nature of Krishna, I'll give you one thing that continues to fascinate me and has been fascinating me for many years. We often hear that that um, Krishna's form is achintya, inconceivable, right? is inconceivable. But how is it inconceivable? Just like we're in the month of Damodar now, and Mother Yashoda, when she finally caught Krishna and was making assessment to um tie Krishna, a very interesting thing happened. She called for rope and she put it around Krishna's waist and brought it to tie and found it was 2 fingers too short. So then she called for more rope and added that rope. So she would have joined that rope together to the first piece of rope and put it around Krishna's waist. It was again 2 fingers too short. And she called for increasing and increasing amounts of rope. And each time she would add it to the previous length of ropes that she would have already added together, and she would put it around Krishna's waist and the mortar, etc., and it would be the same 2 fingers too short. So she was thinking to herself, how is it I am adding rope, and despite how much rope I add, it is always the same amount too short? This astonished her. What further astonished her is she saw that Krishna was wearing a belt, a jeweled belt around his waist that was going around. Krishna had bangles on his ankle, and that was going around. She could take her arms and put it around Krishna, and it was going around. No issue, no problem, right? How is it that despite my adding so much lengths and additional lengths upon lengths upon lengths of rope, it is not able to go around? And this is an amazing thing. Why? Because Krishna, he's wearing a belt around his waist. His form is limited because it accommodates the belt around his waist of jewels. Krishna is wearing bangles on his ankles. His form is limited. Mother Yashoda is able to put her arms around Krishna and embrace her child. Krishna's form is limited. But despite Mother Yashoda adding unlimited amounts of rope, it is unable to go around Krishna's belly. Why? Because Krishna's form is unlimited. So Krishna's form as a baby without changing is simultaneously limited and unlimited. Krishna doesn't have to change his form to display his opulence. Simultaneously, within the form of Krishna, it is unlimited and limited at the same time, in the same space, and witnessed by people. In this case, Mother Yashoda and the other gopis who were there and recorded in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Without changing his form, Krishna is limited and unlimited. Now let us wrap our heads around that for a minute. How is that possible? This is the nature of Krishna. And therefore, Acharyas comment that the first 9 cantos of Bhagavatam are meant to answer questions regarding the nature of God. But when we come to the 10th canto, we are meant to relish the activities of the Absolute Truth. All questions about God, everything is supposed to be answered within the first 9 cantos of Bhagavatam. When we come to the 10th canto, we have to just sit and drink. Muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. To drink this nectar of the pastimes of Krishna. This is the amazing thing about Krishna's pastimes. It is difficult to measure Krishna's pastimes, to put some measurement on it, because Krishna's pastimes are not meant to be understood in the head. Krishna's pastimes are meant to be appreciated in one's heart. It is beyond the head, it is beyond measurement. Krishna's pastimes has to be felt, and the feeling or the experiencing of Krishna's pastimes, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to Bhagavad Gita, in the purport to the verse Machita Madgata Prana Bodhayanta Parasparam Katayantaschamam Nityam Tushyanti Cha Ramanti Cha. He says that a devotee, he takes pleasure in Krishna's pastimes just as naturally as a young boy and young girl take pleasure in each other's company. It's quite a fascinating statement that Srila Prabhupada makes. Why? Because when a young boy and young girl are in each other's company, there's no measurement, there's no thinking, there's no logic, there's only natural affection that brings them together. And that is the effect that Krishna's pastimes can have on us. This is actually the result of hearing Krishna's pastimes. What we want to do as devotees of Krishna is not just, be attracted to Krishna because Bhagavatam says we have to do this, or Bhagavad Gita says we have to surrender to Krishna, or this thing is given in scripture, this instruction is given to Krishna. That can take us up to a certain point in our spiritual practice. But to go beyond that, to really experience Krishna's sweetness, beyond Krishna's majesty, we have to hear about Krishna's sweetness. And the hearing about Krishna's sweetness creates such an indelible mark in our consciousness that these other things become easier to understand. And Krishna's pastimes, as he displays them here in Vrindavan, they act like a shower of nectar on the consciousness for those who have come to appreciate Krishna's sweetness. And therefore, these pastimes like Govardhan Lila, like Damodar Lila, like the pastimes we would hear in next week's classes about the different pastime places around Govardhan. When Krishna says, always think of me, this is what we have to think of. What Krishna does, what does Krishna like, how does Krishna interact with these devotees, what does Krishna feel? You know, this Bhagavatam gives us an insight into that. And Srila Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they are inviting us to enter into that world through Krishna's pastimes, as it is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, there's no book that compares to Bhagavatam because there's no measurement. Bhagavatam is equal to Krishna in all regards, in all respects. And one who pays attention to Bhagavatam, we get the experience of seeing Krishna face to face in each page, in each line, in each purport, in each verse. This is the excellent nature of the Bhagavatam. This is the opportunity that each and every one of us have. And one of the things I would say that is quite a blessing in this thing, that Rajarshi Prabhu is taking a humble position and listening to me. But he is actually my inspiration for learning and studying scriptures. And one of the most important things that takes place in Trinidad 2 times a day, 6 and oftentimes 7 days a week, is every morning they would get together and read and hear Bhagavatam. And every evening they would get together and read and hear Bhagavad Gita and some other scripture to deeply connect with Krishna. This is the habit that each and every one of us should try to develop, to become connected with Krishna through these literatures. This is the opportunity that this month of Kartik gives us. So this is a very important point that Rajarshi Prabhu was making regarding these things. It is not just to measure. Logic cannot, and even if we have all the logic and we could explain all these things logically, Krishna is still beyond logic. Krishna is not limited to the logic of the mentality of the material mind. Krishna is beyond logic. Else, how Indra becomes confused as to Krishna's position? Else, how does Lord Brahma become confused as to Krishna's position? Because Krishna is beyond logic. The greatest controllers in the universe fail to grasp the supremacy and the sweetness of Krishna as he appears in Vrindavan. This is the nature of Krishna in Vrindavan. It is beyond anything we can imagine, but it has to be experienced by a heart that is becoming saturated with devotion. Is there anything else? I know I went, that was a long-winded
Uh,
response to a comment.
I know there may be many people with things, but this thought came to my mind, always when we're dealing with Indra's, you know, predicament and Brahma's predicament in relation to Krishna, the beginning of the Bhagavatam establishing Krishna as the absolute truth. One of the things is Mohyanti Suraya. It
Mm.
is by him that even the biggest of the devatas, they are bewildered, they're put into illusion. So when Krishna comes, he wants to establish himself as that Param Satyam. So his putting the king of heaven and Brahma, in their position and so on is part of his plan to establish himself as Param Satyam and Mohiyanti Yatsureya. He bewilders even the gods. Hare Krishna.
There's a very interesting Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in commenting on that verse of Bhagavatam. He analyzes it in five different ways, and one of them he speaks about Krishna's form and Krishna's pastimes. So he says that Tene Brahma Hrida Ya Adi Kavaye means that it was Krishna who revealed to Brahma that the boys and calves were actually the supreme Brahman. In other words, that Brahma becomes bewildered by Krishna himself. Muhyanti Yatsurya, that even great persons like Narada becomes bewildered. That whose body, Tejo Vari Mridam, that even though Krishna's body appears to be material to the demons, is not material and is not temporary at all. And that through his abode in Mathura, Vrindavan, and by the revelation of his form to his devotees, the ignorance concerning himself is destroyed within the heart of those devotees. And therefore, Satyam Param Dhimahi. Let us meditate on that Krishna who is known as Satya. He gives a very interesting commentary on the meaning of the first verse of Bhagavatam. You know, very, very nice. Is there anything else? Any reflections anybody would like to share regarding today's presentation? So when nobody responds, I'm not sure if anybody is there or if, you know, at least one or two people share some feedback. At least
Hare Krishna
so
Prabhu. We are completely blown away by how you describe what you described in the last couple of minutes. Completely blown away, Prabhu. I can't find words to describe how I feel. Thank you so very much.
Hare Krishna. That was inspired by Rajarshi Prabhu's comment. um, Anything else? At least one more person. At least you could share one thing that you remembered from today's presentation. Okay, so if not, we'll end and we'll continue next week, Wednesday. And just I'll give you a little I am hoping to have a guest presenter either next week, Wednesday, or next week, Thursday. When that becomes finalized, I'll let you know, and it would be a treat. It would be a treat if this person is able to schedule their time accordingly that they could appear on the Zoom meeting next week, either Wednesday or Thursday. So I'll let you know and update you as to how that develops. Right? So you could I don't want to reveal who or what it is just yet, but it's something that you will it will be like consuming 1008 sumptuous gulab jamuns simultaneously in your mouth without the fear of diabetes reading being affected. So let's see if that works out for next week. Hare Krishna. All right. So thank you very much. And next week. And also tomorrow is the festival of the disappearance of Srila Prabhupada. So we can take tonight and reflect on the wonderful gifts that we have received from Srila Prabhupada, and what can we do to 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 reciprocate with Srila Prabhupada's gift to us. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti
Jai,
Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri
Jai,
Giriraj Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.